Hey everybody, and welcome once again to the Church TechCast Q and A show. I've got the chat room open, ready for questions. There's been some interaction already, and I'm always happy about that. So I have some questions, most of which were sent to me directly. So we'll get on those right away. By the way, if you're watching this later or you just want to do it right now, you can drop me a line. Paul at trinitydigitalmedia.com, or give me a call 1-877-763-3246 or 1-877-POD-ECHO, and you can echo back to this podcast. So let's get going with the questions without further ado. Well, once I remove that. Okay, now Denver House of Prayer on Twitter asked me all about sound mixers. So here's the question. Hi Paul, I do have a question you may be able to help me with. We are about to start training sessions at our church and will need to buy a soundboard. Do you have a recommendation for a solid soundboard that is simple but effective? I'm not very technical with sound equipment. Now, after some additional questions and all, it turns out that he wants a very basic system. Basically, it's going to be a couple of mics at the beginning, but it might grow to as many as 8 inputs. So immediately I thought, well, Behringer is your low-cost solution. They're not the best, but they're low cost and not horrid. So I thought about that, and I looked, and unfortunately, I'm looking for 8 XLRs. I think that's going to give him the greatest flexibility. And while I did find a model, let's see here, that is the Xenix X2442 USB 24 input model. Yeah, it says 24 inputs. It's about 8 of those are XLRs, and then the other 16 are TRS, tip ring sleeve, just as stereo inputs. So that's one that I found. I also found one, and now I haven't used this particular model, but hearing Dave Jackson over at School of Podcasting talk about it, seems like the what brand was this? The Seismic Audio might be actually more like what he was looking for. He was looking for something that would be very frugal and would also he could plug speakers directly into it. Well, there is a Seismic Audio powered mixer that has an onboard amplifier that's pretty inexpensive, in the $200 to $300 range, and so I sent him that link as well. The Seismic Audio Landslide 8P 8-channel DSP professional powered mixer is what it's called on Amazon, and I'll have those links down in the show notes for this show should you need it. So basically, just as a backup, I want to say that you really need 3 components to make sound. You need a mixer. Well, you need whatever's going into the mixer. Then you need a mixer, you need an amplifier, and you need speakers. Now, what a lot of people don't know, because they don't think about the amplifier, is there's 2 ways to get an amplifier without having a separate amplifier. A separate amplifier is probably going to give you the best performance, because you can get an appropriate amplifier for your particular situation, as opposed to kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. But if you want to cut that down component-wise, you can go with self-amplified speakers. That's one solution. So the amplifier is built into the speakers. So you'll need to plug power into the speakers for the amplifier that's built into the speakers. Or you can use a powered mixer. And so in this case, he should either, if he goes with the Behringer, he should get self-amplified speakers, or if he goes with the seismic, he should go with passive speakers, speakers that need amplification. And either way, it should work. Now, of course, he could instead go with the Behringer, get a separate amplifier, and then speakers that need to be amplified, and that would work as well. But both of those mixers have 8 inputs. If that's too rich for his blood, it could be that he can go down a couple of notches and get like 4 XLR inputs and then some stereo inputs, and then just do some creative work that way. So that's what I would recommend. Now, David Sotelo commented on one of my tutorials on YouTube, which you can see by going to bit.ly/paultube, and that'll bring up all my videos. I've got, I want to say, about 150 videos there. So there's a good amount. I've got several that are screencasts for ProPresenter 5, which is exactly what he was talking about here. ProPresenter 5 is software created by Renewed Vision by a programmer who ran the lyrics at his church, and he didn't like any of the software out there, so he wrote his own, and that became ProPresenter 1, and then they actually started selling it in ProPresenter 2 or 3. And ProPresenter 5 is very mature and a great product that I recommend highly. So anyway, on that, I have a tutorial on how to put a video with a transparent background over another video. So this is the comment that I got on that. From Dave, he says, I just have one simple question. Could I do lyrics with no background in Final Cut Pro 10? And I actually didn't know the answer to this because I always use Motion for this particular thing. So I fired up Final Cut Pro 10, and yes, in fact, you can. Now you need to make sure the setting that you set it for is ProRes 4444. 4 fours, 16 if you want to think of it that way. ProRes 4444, because you can't use ProRes 422 or H.264 because part of the way that they save space is they cut out the alpha channel layer, which is what's necessary to get the transparent background. So basically you would put the text, in this case is what he wants to do, as the main storyline in Final Cut Pro 10, and edit to your heart's content, put black in, maybe you put a click track as the audio, whatever. Now when you go to export that, I do a Command E that will export from the share menu. Make sure you set it to export with current settings, because you don't want it to go to ProRes 422, or all of it will be for not H.264. As I say, those strip out the alpha channel, which you need. Now this is going to be a pretty big file, so make sure you have plenty of hard drive space when you're doing this, but you can absolutely use that in ProPresenter 5. Now he did ask me if this would work with ProPresenter 4, and I actually just don't know that, and I don't have ProPresenter 4 to test out. I think it might, because ProPresenter 4 is more similar to ProPresenter 5 than it is to ProPresenter 3. ProPresenter 3, I feel confident in saying, would not do this at all. So you're probably going to need 5. You might get by with 4 in this case. Turns out what he was doing is he's got a concert coming up with an outside artist, and that's important for this piece of advice that I'm going to give him too. And he wants to, just pull out all the stops with lyrics on his screen. So he was thinking, live backgrounds and all that. And so I told him that I suggested he didn't do this with iMac necessarily, unless he did that through his switcher, and then the alpha channel isn't necessarily going to help him because he doesn't have a Mac Pro that can have the appropriate card. So that's not going to help him. He would do either a Luma key, removing the black from the background, or a chroma key, in which case he would have a colored background that he would remove the color from with his switcher. The other piece of advice is, the way we do this at our church is we have a click track, and the musicians stay on time with the click track. And that's what I showed in that tutorial, which I'll link in the show notes. But the problem with doing that is you need to make sure that they practice, they're familiar, they're cool with it, because some musicians find that constant metronome click very annoying. So in order to get around that, what I would do is I would make a video for each verse. Don't split up things too specifically, but when each verse shows up, you start the video, and as long as they're roughly in time, you should be fine. And if they get out of time, well, you can fix it the next verse. So it's more work on the front end, but I think it'll yield better results on the back end. The next thing that he asked about was the fonts that I used for that, and I think that they were available on Dafont, DAFONT.com. I actually didn't make that specific video that I show one of the other video guys at my church did, and so for Dafont, you just find an appropriate font, download it, and it should show up in Final Cut 10 once you restart the software, and having installed the font, of course. Next question he might have is all about, oh yeah, he asked me how to do one of the effects that I had, and I did that in Motion. So that's just one of the preset behaviors that you can do in Motion. So it's pretty straightforward. So next question, and I think this is going to be our last question for today, and that is Steve on Church Tech Leaders. And that's ctl.onthecity.com, I believe. And his heading is Projector no longer likes long distance HDMI. Now, here's what it said. Had a bad experience with Panasonic's tech support team. We're at a disagreement over whose components are causing the problem. Here's what we're facing. Projector is hooked up to a 100 feet HDMI cable with an internal signal amp. The signal worked great for about 8 months and then stopped working. We try a short HDMI cable and the signal works great. Try another 100-foot HDMI cable, still no signal. Try HDMI over Cat 6, still no signal. Try the same 100-foot cable with the TV, works fine. Same 100-foot cable with a different projector, signal works great. Try the same 100-foot cable with the original projector, still no signal. Have you had a problem like this before? Thanks. So, from my years in tech support, this sounded like a problem that I've seen before. I worked for a company that did some work with HDMI, and it's just super finicky when you do anything other than connect it with like a 2 meter, 6 foot long type cable. So he said it worked fine for 8 months. What we don't know, and I think it would be difficult to figure out without some really sophisticated test equipment, HDMI either works or it doesn't. Now, it could be that it just barely worked for those 8 months, and then something like a component got a little older, a little less powerful, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be a lot. It could be just a hair less powerful, and then it would quit working. You see, HDMI is engineered to fail. It's purposely created so that it does not work under less than optimal circumstances. What do I mean by that? Well, Hollywood is really afraid that you're going to buy a Blu-ray and use HDMI as the connection to like a Blu-ray recorder or some sort of capture device, and that as a result you will make copies of their Blu-rays. So they have put in all sorts of copy protection to prevent you from doing that, which does in fact prevent you from doing that. It also prevents you from doing a lot of things that are perfectly legal and perfectly legitimate, like send a signal 100 feet to a projector. And even when that signal is not from a Blu-ray, HDMI is HDMI. So it has that copy protection, that HDCP copy protection that has to be present in both locations 100% of the time, or it does not work. And that's the problem. I think probably what the Panasonic projector was designed to do is handle a shorter cable, and the fact that it handled the 100-foot cable is good for it, but it's not designed to. So when it quit working, their repair people would probably say, well, everything's going according to spec. It still works. So I think that the problem is HDMI here. Now what I would do is I would run DVI, I'd run VGA, I'd run any other way other than HDMI to get past this problem. DVI, you might have issues because the EDID, which is basically the digital handshake between devices that must be present. I know that I've worked in like AV rental installation kind of situations, and as recently as last spring there was a huge install that I freelanced for, and we didn't use a single digital cable for the video. Not a one. Zero. Because VGA would give us as good looking a signal, and if there was a problem, it would degrade gracefully. So we'd lose a little resolution that most people wouldn't notice because in a large room they're seated way back from it anyway. So I tend to think that you want to go for a more robust cabling situation than one that will work when you install it and then 8 months later it quits working. So that's what I would suggest. So those are just a few little pieces of wisdom. I continue my doing some trials here, trying to get everything working the way that I want it to, because in my mind, churchtechcast.com will be the world's first 24-hour free church tech training website, and you'll be able to go there anytime, day or night, and watch any of the stuff that I've done, and hopefully that in the future other people have done. So you'll be able to go there and just watch it like it's a television station. I imagine that this will be like what Tech TV used to be about a decade ago, and what Twit is right now, twit.tv, but with an emphasis on the specialized needs of the church. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Right now I'm using, here's a little tip They're still in beta, but it's a public beta. Firepype, FIREPYPE.com, enables me to take this video, upload it to Dropbox, and then they're going to composite the pre-recorded logo, which will be right here when I do it live. It enables that to happen without me working on it. And then what I'm going to do is take all my videos from the week, stick them together in Final Cut, export it, and upload it to the service that I have, which causes this video to loop nonstop. So it's pretty cool stuff. But that's basically what I'm working on right now. I'm hoping to get all this stable and operational and reliable. That's kind of my next project. So, next week, a little program note. I don't know whether I'll be able to do this show at 2 or if I'll need to record it earlier or just skip next week. I've got a freelance video shoot since I still have to support myself other ways. A freelance video shoot tomorrow or next week, a week from Friday, and that's what I'll be doing then. But by all means, feel free to send your questions. If there are questions that are sent directly to me, I'll try and record it early. If not, then I might just skip a week, and we'll see from there. Okay, I hope that that helps everyone, and I hope that you can use that information to go out and change eternity. Till next time, I'm Paul Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.